is Mary Alice Hudson. I went ahead and recorded this based on the videos that have been posted so far. My schedule is full and I was worried about having time to work on this response if I didn't do it on the weekend. So I'm sorry I wasn't able to include some of your videos, but here goes. I thought there were a lot of interesting points made in the videos so far. I feel like Brittany's concern about being a lesser talent or lowering standards is very ill-placed. In my experience, people who worry about their confidence aren't typically the incompetent ones. It's the people that the thought never occurs to who are more likely to lower standards. I think the way Brittany speaks about her field and her students and the fact she is here, learning more about teaching and higher education, point to the likelihood she is going to be an asset to any institution who is lucky enough to hire her, part-time or otherwise. I do, however, think it's unfortunate that the idea even occurred to her. This speaks to a hierarchy that values research above teaching. I thought it was interesting that Brian's experience seemed to support the idea that tenure is on its way out. I wonder if this is true because of the smaller size of the colleges he has been associated with. This is something I know nothing about other than what I've read in our book, so it's interesting to hear the perspective of someone who has experienced it. I agree with Brian's suggestion that culture isn't always a positive force that reduces anxiety. I've worked in a school with a toxic culture, and it negatively impacted everything. I finally felt like I had no other choice but to leave, which I did. Two other colleagues left the year I did, and we were joined the next year by 15 teachers who found employment in other schools. I'm currently in a school with a tremendously positive and supportive culture, so I have no doubt about the impact culture can have on an organization, for better or for worse. Brian echoed some of my thoughts when he talked about the way the academic profession seems to be changing and how the change has been framed as the loss of power and privilege. I guess it's like any change. Those who feel they are losing power are resistant, and those who feel like they have never had any power are supportive or indifferent. I thought Yolanda's point about faculty not realizing the impact they have on students was very telling. It made me think of an article I read recently, teaching the students we have, not the students we wish we had. Sadly, this problem exists in K-12 education as well. It's tremendously unfair to students when teachers lament the sit-and-get classrooms of the past and refuse to adapt to the present needs of students. This goes back to culture and change. Change is hard, but it's inevitable. Teachers who can't or won't change with the times and with the students' needs shouldn't be teaching. UNCW's focus on applied learning, which I learned about in the applied learning course I took this summer with Dr. DeVita, is a perfect example of a university responding to changes in society and in students' needs. I think it speaks highly of UNCW's culture that the university is seriously focused on making higher education relevant and meaningful for today's students. And finally, Shannon's mention of the way online and for-profit institutions impact the reported balance between teaching, research, and service in higher ed was something I hadn't thought about. I wonder if these institutions are included in the statistics in our texts. I'm guessing they might not be heavily represented based on the publication dates of the texts, but it would be interesting to know how the growth of online and for-profits are changing the landscape of higher ed. As far as additional thoughts since my first post, I've continued reading our text, and I think maybe I shouldn't be so hard on the University of Tennessee about my undergraduate experience. In Optimizing Research and Teaching, Geiger makes it pretty clear that my experience at UT in the 1980s was typical for the time, when research was emphasized and undergraduates were not. Honestly, this makes me feel better about higher ed and undergraduate education in general. I'm hopeful UT is more student-focused than it was 30 years ago. Judging by this recent news story, it is a kinder, gentler place. If you haven't seen this story, it's heartwarming. Here are my references. Thank you, Brittany, Brian, Yolanda, and Shannon for sharing your thought-provoking ideas. I enjoyed watching your videos, and I look forward to more to come. Thank you.